Today, I am really excited and feel honored to have as a guest Jude Weber. Jude, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
It is so good to see you. I'll tell the listeners a little bit about our connection and introduce you. Jude is she's a speaker, she's a coach, she is a internationally certified EFT tapping practitioner, which we're going to learn more about, which is an incredible practice in the space of spiritual growth and healing. And has a master's in spiritual psychology. And Judy and I were in a workshop with over 100 other people a few weeks ago. And as part of that workshop on Zoom, they had these little breakout rooms with literally just her, myself, and one other person where we got to share little bits of our personal story that we were working on. And within, I don't know, Jude, maybe minutes, we had a connection of our own struggles and our own healing and our own growth. And that led to a couple of follow-up conversations. And now the opportunity to have you share your story on Overcome Out Loud. And I know we both believe there's no coincidences, but boy, that's sure a great example of it, huh?
Yeah, and I think actually that might have been maybe the only breakout room that we did, the entire weekend.
It's true. It's incredible. And I'm so, especially with having some insight into everything that you've overcome and the courage and, the vulnerability that you have to share that, because I know so many people struggle, from an identification standpoint with some of the things that you've gone through and feel stuck. And, one of the things that I know for myself personally, having suffered in silence for so long and feeling alone, and isolation is, one of the greatest kind of issues that plague our country. And I'm talking about before COVID, people felt alone and isolated. And I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of connection. And so, I think part of what we can do is share the importance of connection. And as we get into that, maybe you could just start us a little bit. I know you've got East Coast roots. Can you tell us a little bit about your origin story and where you grew up? I mean, where we come from has a lot to do with how we got here. And just give us some insight into where you grew up and how you grew up.
Sure. First, I just really want to acknowledge what you're doing out in the world and creating this for so many people, because like you said, suffering in silence is, it's not a good journey to be able to do that, so this is incredible. And I grew up in New York, on Long Island. That's two words, Long Island. I grew up, in my house where I grew up, there was a lot of rage, a lot of chaos, alcoholism, just really never growing up with I wouldn't even say a sense of self was like the minimum, it was just, I grew up in exactly what you were talking about, in isolation, inside, stuffing my feelings, terrified of being seen, that was a risk. And so that really, and one very significant physical abuse incident that just truly created the trajectory of my life and how I grew up protecting myself and the destruction that became because of that.
It's so amazing to hear. And I think so many people can relate. I mean, the impacts of trauma, and I'm clear to, and we've had many guests on as we talk about trauma. Trauma comes in all shapes and sizes. It's personal, it's individual, and it's an experience. I recently read that there is no opposite word for trauma. There is no word that you could ever come up with that would be the opposite of trauma, because trauma is so impactful. And you talk about a few things that growing up with some of those environmental impacts caused for you. And can you expand a little bit on that not wanting to be seen? Because I think, when we disconnect, when we don't know ourselves, when we don't feel safe, and I think that's what I heard in a lot of what you described in your childhood, is you didn't feel physically safe, but you didn't feel emotionally safe. You didn't feel emotionally safe to just know who you are and to be who you are. And so you started to stuff that. Is that resonate with you? And how did that kind of not wanting to be seen manifest?
Yeah, no, I mean, you are spot on. It started, my father's rage at the mere age of 4 years old, was already etched in my being. And I knew it was not safe to be seen. It was a definite risk. And so, by fourth grade, I just have this, really vivid memory. I went to class very excited about sharing with my teacher how my brother taught me this magical formula to do division, because I guess I wasn't getting it. And so I was so beaming going to class, raising my hand, which was already a risk. And when I shared with the class what he taught me, she had a very sarcastic response like, "That's what we've been doing all along." And I was crushed. And of course, followed by the laughter of the class, the humiliation, of putting myself out there. And I just remember staring out the window like dazed. And I just made that internal conclusion: nowhere is it safe. Not at home, not in the world. In fact, it's not even safe being me. And that, that conclusion really, of course, not cognitively did I really know what I was concluding to myself. But what happened was I began to use food as a way of stuffing all the terror at how big the world was and how out of control I felt. And it was the only way that for momentary, moments at a time, that I could control the madness of my world. And that eventually led to understanding that, well, being heavy as a child clearly isn't the way to be invisible and not be seen. It was way too visible. So as I got older in high school, I recognized that, oh, if I'm thin, then I can get positive attention. And that would be my protection, and then I couldn't be rejected and nobody could hurt me. And so my body became like the epicenter of control. And that projected into 25 years of my life, starving myself, compulsively exercising, chiseling and perfecting the external, of who I was, thinking that would be the thing when I would be loved. And really, that became such destruction on so many levels, until I landed in a treatment center, 89 pounds and on a feeding tube, not even, really being alive pretty much. My body made absolute sure that I was not going to be seen. And in fact, they talk about eating disorders is like dying slowly. You're really trying to just stay invisible when inside I was screaming for expression, to be able to be who I was. But I had never learned any of these, ways that was safe to be out in the world. And, after my first experience in treatment, staying alive through the feeding tube, I went back out, thinking I was all healed. And I had never even touched any of the emotional, or the psychological traumas that had really taken place in my life. And I think you and I had a previous conversation, like 30 days in treatment is not really, the turnaround, and especially for someone who, like me, at this point, I was already in my 40s. So this was really ingrained in my life, my habits and my patterns and my ways of protecting myself. And it wasn't even only emotionally and mentally, it was my body knew automatically, the wiring of my body knew exactly what to do so that I would not be out in the world, and what's ironic is that I was very successful. I was out in the world, but my body at that point was able to hold all the traumas because of everything else that I was doing until that didn't work anymore. And what happened was, after my second time in treatment, once I really stopped the behaviors of the eating disorder, my body became a house that just, every trauma that was stored in my cells just completely unleashed all over my body. And I was in bed for about 5 years like a burn victim, and nobody could figure it out. Now, I had had a history of eczema, but this was like no doctor had ever seen it. and years of lying in bed, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, just seeking desperately any answer. And I couldn't get anything to control it, not steroids. I was on all kinds of different medications. And I, ultimately I went to this one doctor who I thought could help me. And he was so kind, but after weeks and weeks of being on, I was on a transplant medication that they use to control inflammation. And I will just never forget walking into his office, for the last time. And he just looked at me and he said, "Jude, dear, your largest organ is failing." And I became that dazed person that I was in fourth grade. I just thought, I'm not going to make it. And here's the turnaround. I came home that day, and I had already been practicing Buddhism for 24 years at that point, and I never stopped my prayer throughout. Even though I physically couldn't even do it, I mustered every day to do what I could. And that day I came home and I sat down and I chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, like my life depended on it, because it really did. And something shifted. It was like all my unanswered prayers accumulated in that moment. And I realized I have to take full responsibility. I am going to choose me and not give my life to all these doctors to find the answers for me. And that's really when things started to turn around, just that momentary decision. It really is amazing how when we, I've heard that quote, when we make the decision, how the universe supports our moving forward. And that was it. I had made a vow. I think this is one of the most important pieces of my story, that I made a vow that this healing was not only for me, this had to be something bigger than me, and that I was going to heal no matter what it took, no matter what more life was going to ask of me, because I have to use my life in service to other people so that they don't have to live through the isolation, living their lives, with the fear of rejection, holding in their expression, creating, illness in the body. And that's what happened, and then things started moving from there.
Wow. I mean, there is that old saying, right? The body does keep the score. And I'm always clear as a result of kind of the journey that I've been on. And I think all people that have an overcome story need to understand is what you don't deal with will ultimately deal with you. I mean, there is really, no way out of escaping. And I know we all try to avoid pain and we try to find pleasure and we learn these habits. And, one of the things that really struck me was this narrative, and they say the brain can drop bombs or food and a syringe can deliver a life-ending dose of drugs or medicine to save us. It really depends on what you put in the plane or what you put in the syringe. And I think what's important for people to understand about this kind of false sense of self that you created was, something called confirmation bias, which I think is, we learn these stories that we hear from adults or teachers in both of our cases. And then our little minds latch onto that as the truth. And then we look for all the things in our lives to prove these beliefs. I mean, I think I always talk about on this podcast how there's two primary drivers to results in our lives, and they are the beliefs that we have about ourselves and the behaviors we engage in. And when those things are out of alignment, it's really difficult to achieve lasting peace, fulfillment, and any kind of, quote unquote success, define that as you'd like. And so you had so many, I call it a damaged personal truth. It was damaged, it was broken, and it was written or given to you. The music was given to you by your dad and by these teachers. And that path was laid down. And then you looked for all the things to prove it, but you didn't want to feel that way. And so, at some point, every experience you had was just proving you're not enough. And that's, I think, the important shift is when we change the way we see ourselves, then the world that we exist in actually changes. Because, obviously your heart, your soul, your brain, all the things that you exist in the same physical human body as you did when you were struggling, but but the language of your heart and the language of your self-efficacy, what you believe about yourself, has shifted, which has allowed you to become healthy. And that's, I just think, so important to dig into about how especially in high school, and I don't want to minimize and really want to dig into the issues that we have around comparison and body image, and how attentive everybody seems to be to that, but really to thine own self be true. And you had broken beliefs, and you looked for things to prove you weren't enough over and over again. And we always want control. And how did food take on that role? Because everybody, and being in recovery from drugs and alcohol, I will tell you that I can abstain from drugs and alcohol, but you can't. I mean, you have to eat, you have to nourish your body. And so where did the control from the food change from unhealthy to healthy for you? I know that's a lot there. I want to talk about both the beliefs and then the unhealthy relationship with food. Maybe we'll start with the beliefs and how you change those.
Yeah, no, they're both such profound points. I mean, the beliefs, quite honestly, it's a process and a journey. It took a lot, because up until at this point, I was in my late 40s, and it's an ongoing journey, even today, it's a muscle that I build, and I do a lot of work, to be able to live into my vision and, keep a particular vibration. And it's really intentionality, but that transition, you are so accurate. I walked around the world reflecting the people and the experiences that I felt rejected, because outer experience is a reflection of inner reality, so, wherever we are, there we go. And so I just did a lot of work. I mean, again, prayer for me is always, number one. This now that's the epicenter of my life, whether it's, my Buddhist practice or the universal law or spirit, the divine, however one wants to language it. But it really is, I think it's important to acknowledge that there's a co-creative process, but I have to be the one to take responsibility. And I think, again, going back to that choice, that I'm no longer a victim to whatever the circumstances are. And, again, for me, I ended up becoming a certified mindfulness meditation teacher, because I wanted to live that way of life. I didn't want to study it to just parrot it, like I wanted to embody it and live it. And that's my value of integrity. I like to really experience it for myself. And that was a big piece, and that was like in the crux of the deep pain, both physically and emotionally. And to be able to have that the moments of pause, or to slow my body down, and to really, have the courage to feel what my body was experiencing, was enormous. And, I didn't do it alone. I had people guiding me through it. And that's the beauty, right? We don't have to do any of this work or this journey alone. And then I really discovered EFT, emotional freedom technique tapping. And that for me has been a game changer in my world, because it's really about getting into the experiences and the traumas and the memories that have been stored in my cells, which that's what trauma does, right? It gets stored in the organs and the cells, and really unraveling such a tremendous amount of trauma. It's still ongoing. It's not like I've graduated. My life is a process, and I embrace that, and I welcome it, because I always want to be evolving and growing. And the other piece, that I just want to share, that I think is also really important in the shifting, is, serving, making it be bigger than me, in my pain, in being in bed, in the dire, internal, suffering that I was with. One day, one minute I wanted to end my life, and the next minute I was holding on to that vision of what could be, and so I think having a why that's bigger than me was really the thing that pulled me forward. Just the rigorous and the persistent resilience of visualizing that, and affirming that in my head was a big piece in shifting who I would be in the world. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm serving and I'm helping people, how could I possibly feel rejection of who I was?
Wow. I mean, it's amazing to me, because I think the two pieces are, when we're running from something and we're running from our feelings, and we're really running from ourselves. And that's what you were doing. And that's why, I think you'll talk a little bit now about how that controlling my emotions through trying to control my external environment instead of going inside, my body's going to keep trying to either look for food, control food, not eat food. And then when food's not enough, I'll over exercise. I'm going to keep trying to control the influence that external things have over me by controlling what I do, instead of pausing for a moment and starting to change the way my body relates to or reacts to external stimulus, and make that we call it an inside job. I don't know if many people know what that means, but it's like, it starts from how I process what's happening. I think Viktor Frankl said in Man's Search for Meaning, right? That area between stimulus and response is that opportunity to choose healthy or not healthy. It's our choice, the steering wheel of the ship. And this is what I really hear from you. And ultimately, it's changing the dynamic and stopping running and starting to go inside, so that the food, the control of food, the eating it, the not eating it, the over exercising, and shifting that to a mind, which is just being present in your own place and understanding who you are and what you stand for. Sounds like it became really important. And that's kind of what changed the way your body reacted, was taking a second and getting present.
Well, I mean, that's the key. One, just talking about the food piece, all of the obsession, right, about what I'm going to eat, how I'm going to eat, am I going to starve, am I going to exercise, all of those moment to moment obsessions is all a diversion from feeling the reality of what I was feeling, rejected, unwanted, wasn't going to make it, like I was just a mistake. I shouldn't be here. So everything became, an addiction. They call it, a mind altering state, and so that all of that obsession was just a mind altering state for me to never, ever go anywhere near the terror of what that felt like. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. And
Yeah.
when it wasn't about the food, then it became about what was going on with my health. Then there was that obsession, and so the body, as you said, the body keeps the score. My body and my mind knew how to keep me not seen. It then created, well, I had to be in bed for 5 years so nobody could see me. I was already hurting myself so nobody else could hurt me. I was taking the first blow. And so all of these conditions really is about the mind-body relationship, which not only in tapping, have I done that, but I have done extensive study on mind-body medicine. And that's really what I work with now, about ways and techniques to just stay in the body when something comes up. It's, not going into the old responses or behaviors or fear and down that whole rabbit hole. And, how am I going to fix this, which is just, as far as I'm concerned, a remedy for suffering, because the more we resist what's present, as we know, what we resist persists, and it has taken a lot of, again, rigorous presencing to be able to be with my body, let come up whatever's coming up. I do a lot of dialoguing and parts work inside my body and giving it the full expression, as well as my inner child, that little girl who felt terrified. I give a lot of airtime and playtime to that because I think it's necessary to fully heal. If she's not fully healed, she's the one running the show. I can be out in the world all day long doing whatever I want, but if she's still feeling terrified of being seen, that's when the body does keep the score and the body starts to speak. If I'm not getting it, in a way that's graceful, that I can see it in advance as opposed to being forced to see it.
Yeah, that's wholesome. And so there's the parts of that are, I have when people come to my office, I have a little miniature replica of Tony Stark's Iron Man's inner power source that he built to keep the shrapnel away from his heart. And people ask if I'm a big Iron Man fan. And although I love the movies, the really reason that I have that is because that represented his power source that kept him alive. And I always tell people, if you've watched the Iron Man movies, if you've ever seen him have to fight an adversary, he never gives that power. He never takes that power out of his chest before he has to fight an adversary. He always keeps his power. And that's, what I hear from you is that same analogy, is that you found the power. And that's what I think one of the greatest things about this podcast and the concept of overcoming is that I see you as the beautiful, centered, present woman that you are the same embodiment of the woman that was sick and in bed, and that what you've changed isn't your outsides. You've had success, you've had all kinds of other things in your life, but what you really changed was the way you feel about yourself. And that's the deep work that allows us to experience life different. And that's available to all of us. I know it sounds, I don't know whether it sounds woo-woo or if it sounds out of touch, but the truth is, I think it's amazing that we're so adapted to listening to our inner critic. It seems so plausible that we can look at and hear what's wrong with us and believe it. But the mere thought of seeing what's good in us seems so far out of touch and seems so, so I use the word conceited, but it seems like so, like, really, I should really just affirm myself. And it's like, yeah, I mean, if you want to listen to what's wrong with yourself, why wouldn't you look at what's good with yourself? It's really where your energy is.
Yeah, I mean, I so hear that. And one of the most important things for me at this point in my journey is, like, on a daily basis, is just to stay really humble and remember where I was, because I know when I was in that place, if I would have heard that, like, it was so not woo-woo out there, but it was such a far reach. Because
Better said. Yeah.
Right? The wiring and the paradigm is so strong. It's like a rocket ship pulling us down. And so that's where I believe, from my experience, a spiritual path and support, really helps, because for all these decades, had gone from doctor to doctor and person to person and healer to healer. And I just wasn't ready to take responsibility for myself, and I think that it's really important to mention that, and not as a blame, because it was so deep inside of me. There were so many layers to, heal before I got to that place. And not to say that's everybody's journey. You know what I mean? In this lifetime, that was my journey, but, I think like the bottom line is what you shared is it is inherent within all of us, and we're all capable of that. And for me, I always say my story is really a story of an uncovering of the power of the human spirit, because I believe my spirit made a lot of choices for me to keep me going, and so, I just, the hope of possibility, no matter who I went to, was still keeping me going. And I think that's the important thing. And I'm sure, as even in addiction or whatever somebody's, drug of choice is, we get there when we get there, you know what I mean? And, but we can get there. That's the most powerful thing, I think, to hold.
And that's, I think that's one of the biggest kind of celebrations of this podcast is it's within all of us. And I like you put it so much better. It seems unattainable when you're in that low spot, that dark spot, the bottom of the hole, and you're looking up and you can see maybe there's some light up there, but I'm never getting out of here to see it. I mean, it just seems so far. And, I heard this morning from one of my mentors and a guy, a bit more of a business, but a very spiritual business mentor, Dave Meltzer, said this morning, fall in love with the start. We all, and I love that, because it's like so many times I fell in love with where I wanted to be. It's like I wanted this and I fell in love with that. And but it was so far away that the love was not lasting. But if I fall in love with the start, if I fall in love with just the simple things I can do today, get up when I say I'm going to get up, be where I say I'm going to be, try to be of service to these small, simple things and enjoy the start, then I'll enjoy the process of getting wherever I'm going, and I won't feel disappointed or pressured to get there. I'll just feel content in the process of getting there. And I think that's, when I heard you say that, it's like, it seems so far out of reach to get where you want to go, but it's not out of reach to be where you are. You can always be where you are. And I think that is one of the most grounding things we can do.
That is so brilliant. I'm so happy that you brought that forward, because one, what I didn't mention, and there's not even a question, you'll agree with me, one of those concepts, if you will, because some people might call it a concept where they're not in the place to embrace it, is gratitude. No matter what place we are in, there's always room to find a seed of gratitude, because nothing is too insignificant to acknowledge or be grateful for. And that is in the moment, right? Because when we have that we know it just opens our heart, it opens a door, and it's such a great beginning. And I have found that both challenging and rewarding, you know what I mean, in the moment of so much suffering. And, the other piece that you were talking, that it brought up for me was the breath, like just being in our breath, the gratitude that life is breathing us, we're still here. We can find that to be grateful for, and that's also something in the moment, right here, right now. If there's nowhere else to turn, it's just focusing on the breath, even for a second. There's no, we don't have to like create obstacles of, I can't meditate for an hour or 30 minutes. We could take a moment and just breathe in and out and focus on the breath for a simple few moments. And that can be a beginning.
How important, I'm going to dig into gratitude a little bit. How important, and where did you find, as you sit there 5 years, essentially, in a bed, dealing with all of the things you've had to recover from, where did you finally grasp the concept of gratitude? Because I think sometimes people feel like there's nothing to be grateful for and in their lives. And, I don't know about you, but I just took a breath and there's a lot of oxygen in the world and I need it to live. And even just being grateful for that seems to be a good starting point. But where did you find the concept of gratitude and how did it start to grow legs for you? Because I think it's foundational to a life worth living. And I've been doing gratitude lists for a long time. In fact, I started writing them down recently every morning in a journal that my daughter gave me. And when I find myself, my little hack for people that don't understand the benefits of gratitude, if you do a gratitude list and write 3 things you're grateful for and you're still feeling in self-pity or self-doubt, imagine not having those things and then relook at being grateful for them. I'm going to tell you right now that when you write down you're grateful for oxygen, then you imagine not having it, you'll find you're even more grateful for it. So back to you and where you found this lifeline of gratitude, because I love that you emphasize that as being foundational in your recovery.
Yeah, and thank you for everything you just shared. And I love that. And I love that your daughter brought you the journal to be able to do that. It wasn't always easy. I'm just really speaking the truth. There were more days than not that I was filled with anger.
Yeah.
Because I was in such a victim place of like, why is this happening to me? And, what is the purpose of all this? And even within that, I think, again, I go back to, a spiritual practice, whatever that is for somebody, just to be able to have something that I could hold, and it could be like a rope for me to just keep going from moment to moment. And, also just waking up every day, even though it was really hard, there's room to just say, I open my eyes today. I can see today. I can walk today. I have my body parts. I mean, it was really like the basic things, because there were times when I was so full of inflammation, I couldn't walk, and so you start with whatever is available to you, even just opening your eyes in the morning, And there's actually, my mentor, she teaches, there's five different types of gratitude. And I'm just going to share a couple of them that might be helpful when we
Please.
don't, when we can't reach for that, obvious gratitude in the moment. And, one of them is like thinking back to a memory, a happy memory, and just being grateful for that, having the ability to recall or call up that feeling inside ourselves, is all part of heart-brain coherence, when we're in this coherent space and we're breathing into the heart space and we're calling up something, that can immediately shift everything in the body, from the brain to the cortisol to the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's a memory can recall that. Another one is, again, what I just said, anything around you, the smallest thing that you can find available to you, to just be grateful and see how long you might be able to hold that energy of gratitude, and again, even if it's seconds, it's a second more than where you were a second ago. And the other thing is, what I was talking about, the future and the why, is like a generative gratitude, something in the future, thanking, the universe for bringing me the healing that is on its way, or, bringing this emotional shift that's on its way, and all these are ways that we can start to rewire the brain so that the process isn't quite as arduous, to move into this space of hope and possibility.
Wow. And that is, and those words ring so true to me because, I'm struck by a few things. First of all, can you imagine, Jude? I mean, when you sit back and you take a second to think of where you've come from, and then you see yourself on your couch with your beautiful artwork behind you, sharing this story with such hope and optimism and clarity. Could you have ever imagined? I mean, I think if you would have thought where you'd be now, you would have I bet you undersold yourself back then, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, and it's really interesting you say that because, it is so hard to imagine, which is why mindfulness and living in the moment, is such a profound and yet, it could be very challenging, of really just staying in the moment, especially when our bodies are screaming and our brains are screaming. And Dr. Joe Dispenza, calls it like neighing and bucking, like we want to be present and silent, but everything in us is just, creating all kinds of havoc because being in that stillness is so painful.
Well, and I'll share, some just a little bit of research so people can understand why that bucking happens and why what you just described is so important, the rewiring and the focusing on it. Because, what I've learned from my own diving into mental conditioning and into mindfulness is that our brain really does attach to negative experience. I mean, it's that prehistoric brain in ourselves that looks for worry, fear, danger, and keeps us on high alert. And so negative experiences, as you and I both have had, they get stored in long-term memory and get recalled very quickly. But the science and brain mapping has showed that it takes 12 to 15 seconds of intentional reflection on any good experience for it to convert in the same way as negative experiences do into our long-term memory for us to be able to recall. So I don't want to minimize what you just described about these experiences of the past that were good. It's important. And I've done this in workshops that I do where I'll have people grab a memory and really, their daughter at a dance recital, or their son at a baseball game, or their significant other at a concert they've been wanting to go to, and to capture that moment. And then I'll put a timer on and have them spend 12 to 15 seconds keeping that image locked in. And I think people are amazed at how long that is to actually focus on something good, but that's how long it takes to build that muscle of focusing on what's good. And so I'm so glad that you just emphasized those parts of gratitude, because otherwise, our brains just default back to that negative loop. And I've heard people say this is evolutionary now. I mean, with people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, and all of the kind of old sage guys like Zig Ziglar and all these guys becoming, even George Mumford, who's been practicing mindfulness since the 80s, is becoming kind of in vogue. Finally, people are latching on. They want to know how to become, healthy. And so this is really important. So thank you so much for talking about the importance of grabbing some of those positive memories and holding on to them and really remembering them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, we can all, I think, well, I shouldn't say we can all, I don't want to speak for everyone, but if not, right, if there is no memory, then we can imagine one. We can also imagine retracing and changing a memory into something positive. Again, we have all of this inherent ability inside of us to use our imagination, to be able to, change a story or write a new ending to a story, right? Or, so like there's modifications that can be made, and even I remember, taking so many courses, but I remember when I was in that place in bed and, there was someone that I was working with and he was telling me to, it was something to do something physical that I wasn't able to do. And he said, visualize yourself doing it. That's the step in front of you. So again, there really is so many options and opportunities to begin, like you were saying. I love that, fall in love with the start, and, again, right, like a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And we all have the ability, even in our mind, to just take that step if we can't do something physical.
And don't, I don't want to minimize how dark it's. I mean, when you talk about this is what I love about this, the purpose of this podcast. Its mission, because we're not talking about, a stub toe. We're not talking about, a scratch on your, we're talking about a life-threatening condition that you were facing that puts you at death's door. And through the changing of your narrative, the practicing of mindfulness, the asking for help, I should put that first, because it's, I think, obviously one of the first things that most people that have overcome anything talk about is the need to find that humility to ask for help. I love that you have a service mindset, and a servant mentality around the fact that you're getting well, not just for yourself, but to be of service to others. So it takes you out of yourself. I mean, these are things that when you talk about being the captain of your ship, anybody can grab the wheel of their ship and employ all of those resources to steer their ship. And God forbid we ever give that steering wheel to somebody else. We really may just end up where we don't want to be. And I think you've outlined so clearly what it is taking you to overcome, and what an example you are. And I would love for you to share with people your experience with tapping, explain a little bit more about that. And then, I really want to help people understand how they can reach you, because from a healing standpoint, especially I'll say this, as a father and seeing a lot of the issues that young women face, women need really good role models today, and women need people that understand how to heal, and women need a very loud voice around being who they are, whatever that is, wherever that is. And I'm so honored and so glad that we've had the last couple of weeks have had incredibly strong women who have overcome incredible adversity and challenge in their lives and that are thriving now. And so I'd love to learn a little bit about how you transitioned into becoming an internationally certified tapping practitioner, what that is, and how that has served you and how it serves other people. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And, again, bravo to you for having these women on, because not that men obviously, don't suffer in different ways or, overcoming out loud, but I think in my experience with working with a lot of women, it's that stifling of their organic inner self-expression, that really becomes a challenge in life, and I work with a particular group of women with expressive writing, and it is unbelievable the healing that takes place, when these women are all in a particular environment, and just this safe, sacred sanctuary of being able to express themselves for the very first time. it's unbelievable.
Wow.
And I feel honored and inspired by the courage that they bring forward. It's really, it's medicine. It really is. So that aside, tapping, EFT, well, it stands for emotional freedom technique. And that's exactly what it does. It brings emotional freedom, but it also brings freedom from physical, physical experiences or, physical pain. And what it does is it's not like, so it's a cross between, I'm just going to say, like psychology and acupuncture. So the body is run on a meridian system, which is what, if people know about acupuncture, that's what it is. And it's the electrical system that runs through our body. And so when we have energetic or stressors that disrupt our bodies, the balance of the energy system, any kind of stressor, whether it's anxiety, depression, phobia, fear, physical pain, adverse childhood experiences, limiting beliefs, habits, patterns, any of those things, these are all stressors, whether they are, overt or not, as we know, the body can hold in a lot of stress and it can take on a lot depending on somebody's constitution and immunity, until one day it starts to come out in different ways. And again, that could be physical, that could be emotional or mental. And so tapping, when we tap on these specific meridian points and we say, I'm going to explain this, because they talk about in tapping, we tap on the negative. And what the negative statements are is really, in my opinion, honoring what is true for us, the thoughts that we're really thinking and the things that we've really been harboring, and so, because, and I make that distinction because a lot of people think, well, if I tap on the negative things, I'm going to be tapping that in, but that's a misnomer, because what we're doing is we are giving the body permission and the mind permission to express what it is that we've been holding inside. And what happens is, as we're tapping, we neutralize those statements and those experiences. Now, tapping doesn't necessarily take away pain or fix a broken something. What it's doing is, again, it is decreasing and diminishing the stressors that are causing any kind of, disruption in the body. And I know for me personally, and many, 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 people that I've worked with, it is so powerful because it's lowering the cortisol. It's literally creating, us to be able to go into the parasympathetic nervous system. And it really does collapse, if you will. That's a word they use in tapping. It collapses these experiences, that they're no longer in the way. They just, it's really clearing the body on a very deep and profound level. And, it has just transformed my life in countless and boundless ways that have not only given me emotional freedom, but also, that I can now live in the wonder of my aliveness. And that's all I want for other people, is to be able to live in their full expression, really know what it is to live in that wonder of their aliveness, and to be able to live and experience inner peace and freedom.
Wow, what a practice. And thank you so much for I don't even know where to begin, because these issues, touch so many people. And like I said, I think, they're underlying issues that, people have to face. And when it comes to the way those issues manifest, especially for young women, in the context of an eating disorder or an unhealthy relationship with food or exercise or any of those things, to know that there is healing and to know that there is salvation and hope, and more importantly, a life worth living. I love the way that you described experiencing somebody's full, the full essence of themselves. I'm drawn to that Michelangelo analogy where he said, when he sculpted David, that the masterpiece was always inside the stone. I just had to chip away at the pieces that didn't belong so that you could see it. And that's sounds like what you've been able to do for so many. And I know people are going to want to be able to contact you. Can you share a little bit, and we'll put it in the show notes, where your website, how people can get in touch with you and understand more about what you do and draw on your wisdom and experience, Jude?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So my website is www.judeweber.com. A little bit bare bones right now. But that is a place where they can, look and get, some information. They can also email me at judewebercoaching@gmail.com. For me, I'm a person, I know websites are really important, but I'm such a connector. I love connecting energetically and with voice. So I'm always a fan of talking to somebody, because I think that first connection, there can be so much held in that, there's warmth, there's compassion, there's a sense of safety. So I just really encourage that. Should I leave my phone number? Is that appropriate?
Sure, of course.
Yes.
If you'd like people to call you, I think they would love you.
310-985-3740. And I just, really want to emphasize that, like, nobody has to be alone on the journey, even if it's not necessarily working with someone, I'm just available. I don't want anyone to ever have to feel like they are alone in the journey and nothing answers, So even I'm just a wealth of resources and information and offerings, because as my famous quote from Ram Dass, we're all just here walking each other home. And for me, like, there's no other reason why we're here if it's not to help other people.
Amazing. What a great message to end on. We're all just walking each other home. Well, I'm glad I'm walking with you. It's not the last we've heard of you. I know you're working on your personal story. We're working on that together. We've got a lot to do. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability and for coming on Overcome Out Loud. We'll see you again real soon.
Thank you so much, Charlie.